Members, and particularly for the listening audience, just a quick brief. The Premier's question, as you know, the opposition leader is allowed 3 questions. All other members are allowed 1 question, and only members asking the question may submit a supplementary, which are 2 supplementaries. And this morning, the courtesy is always given to the opposition leader to start first. Opposition leader, would you like to present your questions?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning to Bermuda and colleagues. Premier, just one of the topical things that we continue to hear, and probably yourself as well, out into the public and on the Internet, is that we seemingly having a problem with the growing numbers of Bermudans emigrating. Does the Premier, and is he aware that this is becoming more prevalent in Bermuda, that Bermudians are leaving the island?
Thank you, Honourable Member. Premier?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Opposition Leader for his question. What I would state is that empirical evidence is not currently being collected. It's one of the things that were inside of our platform points, and it's something that I know the Department of Statistics is grappling with on the best way to collect these statistics. What I can say is that anytime anyone who decides to leave Bermuda and to live somewhere else is certainly a sad time. But the facts are that we have to remember, Mr. Speaker, that this is an economy that needs restructuring. This is a country that needs restructuring, and there are some persons that cannot afford to live inside of Bermuda, and it is important. People move away for many different opportunities, Mr. Speaker. People move away for educational opportunities. That's the reason why it's important to make sure our public education system is correct, but people also move away for opportunities for jobs that do not exist here and as part of their interests. So the thing is, Mr. Speaker, that it is a wide-ranging problem, but the best way to arrest that and also to make sure that individuals come back, in our view, is to execute our election manifesto and the pledges of which we set out in election manifesto, which we are on the way to doing, Mr. Speaker.
It's a supplementary or a new question?
Supplementary.
Continue.
Yeah, considering that the Premier has mentioned that it is difficult for Bermudians to afford to live here, and so some of that is part of the reason why. Would he believe that that probably is the major reason why? We've always had people who emigrate for other reasons, whether they're going to other jobs or better opportunity for their careers and the likes. But what we are talking about are many of the people that we have identified are not going because they are seeking out to improve their career. It is because they can't afford Bermuda. So the question is, does he believe that they are leaving for economic reasons as a prevalence?
Thank you. Mr. Premier?
Mr. Speaker, I do believe that economic reasons are the main reasons why people leave Bermuda. The main reasons why people leave Bermuda, the ones of which I've spoken to, revolve around education and also revolve around issues inside of our community that around violence and gang violence. And so what I would say is that I do not accept the opposition leader's statement that the prevalent reason for that is. The other reason is that we have to understand, and this is one of the reasons why inside of our election manifesto that we are committed to reviewing foreclosure rules. There are persons who will get in a place where they have lost their job, lose their house, and decide, as opposed to sticking around, to leave the keys to the lawyer and get on a British Airways flight.
Second supplementary or new question?
Second supplementary.
Continue.
Yeah, in consideration of what the Premier is saying, and he has also mentioned that they are looking at how they deal with the situation as far as quantifying the numbers. Can he give us an idea of what they have established thus far? I mean, this is not a new problem. Government's been here for 2 years now. What has been established thus far to try and get a better hold of those numbers of those who are emigrating?
Thank you. Premier?
Mr. Speaker, I cannot speak specifically to what has been done to the Department of Statistics on this particular matter, but I'm happy to speak to the Minister as responsibility and attempt to get him to speak to the opposition leader to certainly fill him in. What I can say, Mr. Speaker, is what is more important The one thing is to count, the other thing is to understand the reasons why and to address the reasons why. And in addressing the reasons why, Mr. Speaker, I will go again. It is executing on the election pledges that were made by this government, Mr. Speaker, dealing with the issues of gang violence, dealing with the issues of education, and dealing with the issues of economic opportunity inside of this country, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Mr. Premier, Opposition Leader, would you like to put your second question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the rescheduling of the number of times Parliament sits in session during doing the people's business. And let me just restate that. Is the Premier considering the comments that he made? And can I say my question, please, Mrs. Speaker?
Members, we'd like to be able to hear what the member on his feet.
Is the Premier considering a change to the scheduling of and number of times Parliament sits in session doing the people's business, as opposed to his statement in the Royal Gazette that there are many other jurisdictions who have shorter sessions and the likes?
Thank you. Premier?
Mr. Speaker, the short answer to the question is that, as is the purview of the government in directing government business, the House of Assembly will sit in regular session. What I can say is, Mr. Speaker, the short answer to his question is no. But the longer answer to his question, Mr. Speaker, is this, is that this House of Assembly, in the 2 years of which we have been in office, has met more often than the first 2 years that the House of Assembly met when that government was in session, Mr. Speaker. The fact of the matter is that we met in April, we met in September, we came back in early, and we may be come back again, Mr. Speaker. We are doing the people's business, but if the opposition leader is, as I say, so upset that we only met 2 days twice
Speaker,
in June,
I would like to
I will let the opposition leader know that we're expecting to meet every
Point of order, Mr.
day in
Speaker.
July.
Point of order?
I've never said such a thing, that I was upset with the number of times that we're sitting at all. In fact, he, in the paper, made the presumption that I would agree with him, but I haven't made any objections to the times that we've sat. We just want to know, is he considering something else?
Okay, thank you. Now, would you like to put a supplementary to your second question, or would you like to do a third question?
Yes, certainly, a supplementary to what he has answered. If in fact then that during his answer he has said that they have met more times than we as a government had met in their parliamentary session, does he feel that the number of times that we have set has offset to be effective in the charge that they have to lower the cost of living? We've met many times, but it has not led to the lower cost of living. It has not led to the lower cost of land tax. It has led to increased costs to Bermuda.
Okay.
So has the number of times that we have said led to a better Bermuda in the cost of living?
Thank you. Premier?
Higher cost of living.
Mr. Speaker, the Progressive Labour Party is focused on executing its agenda, and if we will look at the inflation figures versus the time that they were in office and the time that we were in office, Mr. Speaker, you will recognize that inflation is lower under us than it was under them, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Second supplementary, new question?
Third question.
Okay, third question?
Third question.
Okay, put your question. Put
If
your
we're going to start
question.
interpolation,
Put your question. Just speak to
failing
me.
completely with cost of living. Third question. With the proliferation we continue to see within the newspaper, front page actually, over and over and over, yes, with the proliferation of rats on the island in Bermuda, would the Premier consider that, and does he consider the proliferation of rats in Bermuda a challenge or an island-wide problem?
Premier?
Could I possibly ask the honourable member to repeat his question in full? Just want to make sure I'm answering correctly.
Yeah. Does
Sure,
the
repeat
Premier
the question.
consider the proliferation of rats in Bermuda an island-wide problem?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not entirely certain that I'm going to say that I consider it an island-wide problem. What I can say is that there are a number of factors. This is something which was addressed in a cabinet meeting because there was a question as to number. Now, there is the anecdotal thought that it is due to the frequency in trash collection, but there's other factors that apply insofar as the increased food sources for these persons, which is not there, but just in vegetation, and this is due to the reduction of, was it pesticides? And the reason when they're, seriously, It was this whole thing that came. I see that honorable members opposite are looking shocked and surprised because of the elimination of Roundup, was it? And the banning of Roundup. That means there's actually more vegetation that rats are feeding on. And these are some of the factors that are So here we go, Mr. Speaker.
Speak to the chair.
So here we
Speak
go,
to the
Mr.
chair.
Speaker.
I'm listening.
Here we go. So here's what I'm going to say, Mr. Speaker.
Address
Here's
the
what
chair.
I'm going to do. I am going, Mr. Speaker, to ask the minister who has responsibility for environment and health to table the report of which they got from the technical officers so the honorable members' office can read it. Because if I'm going to stand here in a dispatch box and answer questions from the opposition stating the facts of which I know based upon the information which has been given to me, and they're going to pretend as though if I'm making it up, then I'm just going to give them the evidence from the ministers, from the scientific persons, and we don't need to do this. However, allow me to say this, Mr. Speaker. The Department of Environmental Health certainly is always available. In addition to that, the Ministry of Public Works has additional wheelie bins which have been ordered, which they are giving to certain communities to help to address those problems, and we will continue to work in addressing the issue.
Thank you. Supplementary?
Yeah, supplementary, like
Yes.
actually, and I appreciated the honorable minister gave an extensive view on what he felt about the rats, as the Premier is referring to. Notwithstanding that, you know, the sources of food for rats has grown. We understand that. What I am trying to understand with my supplementary is exactly what is the plan, because we do know we have a proliferation of rats. It is not just coming from any particular neighborhood. It is coming from the public saying this here island-wide. So has the Premier discussed with the minister and the department an extensive plan on how to address the real issue? He said there was a plan per se, but...
Premier?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I can say a couple of things. The first thing that I can say is that there was a public campaign that was done on the need for certain issues in dealing with this particular challenge, and we asked members of the community to remind that the Department of Vector Control, if people feel that they have an issue in their area, they can call Vector Control. Vector Control will come to their house. Vector Control will set traps. They will put you on a list where they come back every 2 weeks. And I'm happy to have that campaign, which was done last year, repeated again for members of the opposition and also members of the public.
Thank you. Second supplementary?
Yes, second supplementary. Yes, bearing that in mind, we're also aware that the vector control for some time was out of stock when people were calling. Out of stock of whatever the products were they were using to ward off rats. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was well publicized. Bait. Was it the bait? Bait. So the question I do have for the Premier is, does he consider, as part of the solution, going back to twice-a-week trash pickup?
Premier?
For the summer period.
Premier?
I'm thankful that the honorable minister, or sorry, the honorable opposition leader, who was a minister at the time, spoke about the shortage. The Minister of Health has informed me that the shortage was when we came into office in 2017, most likely from the issues of which were depleted then. However, allow me to say, Mr. Speaker, at that time, we focused on schools and gardens, because gardens is the most important source of food when it comes for rats. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, what I can say is that since we have come into office and rectified that shortage, there has not been a shortage, as the Minister of Health is indicating to me. And what I would remind persons is that they can go ahead and call the Department of Vector Control. But here we go again, Mr. Speaker. So let's be clear. We have come into office and we have ordered a number of garbage trucks. There are garbage trucks which were ordered because of the plain and simple fact that, well, under their leadership, there was probably no garbage trucks ordered. The Minister of Public Works isn't here, so I cannot clarify. Mr. Speaker, the garbage fleet, just like the bus fleet, didn't get into this problem overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight either. But we're going to continue to get back to the place where we can keep these persons, our fleets up, and continue to add to it. And we are not, Mr. Speaker, going to add twice-a-week trash collection until we have a place where we can deliver it on a regular basis. We know the challenges of which existed when collection did not happen on schedule because buses broke down, additional overtime, etc. We are doing it to manage, and we are continuing to invest in getting the fleets back to where it was, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. That brings us to the completion of the opposition leader's 3 questions. We now move on to other members who have indicated they have questions for the Premier, and the next is the opposition whip. Member, would you like to put your question?
Good morning. My question is around the recent public display of demonstration, in particular at Gorham's. So I would like to know, Mr. Premier, whether the recent insurance block grant that has been legislated has had an impact on not only the likes of employers such as Gorham's, but also Matilda Smith and also Summerhaven.
Premier? Premier?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not entirely certain what question the honorable member has asked me to answer. I know that I'm here to answer questions on a question of government policy, so if she wants to rephrase the question on a matter of actual government policy, I'm going to do my best to try to answer it.
Member, would you like to restate your question?
Did the recent government policy around the block grant of insurance payments to the Bermuda Hospital Board have an impact on the employers such as Gorham's, Matilda Smith, Summerhaven, who are experiencing difficulties with the health insurance because and since the block grant and the premiums?
Premier?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure if she wants me to answer for private businesses. Here's what I can state, though, Mr. Speaker. What I can say is that I happened to read news reports yesterday, and I happened to read news reports of individuals in business and the persons who were at Gorham's who indicated their displeasure at the situation, stating that Gorham's was making money hand over fist. And far be it from me, Mr. Speaker, to comment on a private business, but the honorable member earlier today, the opposition leader, was speaking about cost of living and price in this country, and I happen to think that there are certain companies that are doing reasonably well inside of this economy.
Thank you. Supplementary? No supplementary? The next member who's indicated to have a question for Mr. Premier is the member from constituency 10. Honourable member, would you like to put your question at this point?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning to you and colleagues in the listening audience, to the Honorable Premier. Honorable Premier, in 2018, the government gave a $75,000 payment to Somerset Cricket Club 2 days before Cup Match to support Cup Match. In 2019, will St. George's be receiving a payment to support Cup Match?
Let the Premier, the question was to the Premier. Member, to the Premier. Premier, you have the floor.
Twice as much.
Mr. Speaker, it is clearly the month of July. As I am adorned in my red and blue tie and my red and blue socks, I'm going to just make it clear, Mr. Speaker. Pardon me? Oh, don't feel sorry for me. It's okay. What I can tell the honorable member is that, yes, the government will be supporting the Somerset,
Yes.
It's so hard to say sometimes. Yeah, I know. We will be supporting the St. George's Cricket Club, and it was budgeted inside the budget to support them in the exact amount of $75,000, as was given to Somerset Cricket Club last year.
Supplementary?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like it noted that I object to the support for St. George's this year, Mr. Speaker. But in light of the fact that the Premier is trying to be unbiased in his approach, I ask the Honorable Premier, does he believe this money will be put to good use and they will be able to attract a team to get on the field for the 2 days?
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Point of order.
No point of order allowed in this session.
The member's impugning improper motives on St. George's.
No point of order. No point of order. The next member who has a question for
Mr.
you.
Speaker.
Oh. Put your hands in.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Honorable former Premier for his question. It is my very expectation that the St. George's Cricket Club will put the money to good use. What is important, Mr. Speaker, is to recognize that we are going to do our work and our effort to support our community clubs. Right at this very moment, the Minister of Public Works is meeting with representatives from the Western Stars Football Club in an exact measure to have a public-private partnership between government and the private sector to enable them to redevelop their facilities. Those are conversations which we're having throughout the island, and I'm certain that St. George's will put it to good use, as will other clubs who are getting assistance from government for their infrastructure put it to good use. However, in response to the Honorable former Premier's question, I'm not entirely certain that it's going to help the team.
Thank you, member. The next question, Premier, is from the member from constituency 31. Honourable member, would you like to put your question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Bermuda. Last week, the member from constituency 16, MP Michael Weeks, spoke regarding the Gay Pride Parade scheduled for August 31st. He seemed to suggest that the permission to hold the parade be denied. Does the Honorable Premier agree with this sentiment?
Premier?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I do not believe that we have any role in approving or disapproving a parade that's going to take place. This parade is scheduled for August 31st, and I think it's going to take place.
Thank you. Supplementary? Would you like your supplementary? Member, would you like to use your supplementary?
Yes, just following on from that, I'm asking for whether he agrees with the position that was presented by the member last week, MP Weeks.
Premier?
I'm uncertain what he's asking, Mr. Speaker, if I agree with the position, as I was not in the House last week. But allow me to say this, Mr. Speaker. On August 31st, the members of this community in Bermuda are holding a parade. The parade will happen.
Second supplementary? Yeah.
Second supplementary. Does the Honorable Premier intend to attend the parade?
Premier?
Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, my wife and children will be, like many other Bermudians, in Florida during that week.
Thank you. The next member who has questions for you, Premier, is the member from constituency 19. Member, would you like to put your question now? Member, speak to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and of course, you're the only one that needs to know about
Thank you.
my
Speak to the
attendance.
chair.
Thank you. Right, that's true. That is true. Mr. Speaker, through you to the Premier, if you could tell me, what is the status of the plans to make health care more affordable to Bermuda?
Premier?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm very happy that the Honorable former opposition leader asked that particular question. It is something that the government has been engaged on. The Minister of Health has been in intensive consultation with many sectors of the community as we formulate and to deliver on one of the government's signature election promises. And it is my expectation that the Minister of Health will be making an announcement on that next month. Correct, Minister? Next month.
Thank you. Supplementary?
The supplementary is, as part of the information that was put out, there was a suggestion that there's going to be a schedule of twice-a-year report. Could the minister, twice-a-year report on the progress of your plan? It's in the information that you put out. I read this, and I just wondered whether has a schedule been set up in terms of reporting the progress on the plan?
Thank you. Minister, Premier?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think I can help to refresh the honorable member's memory that I would say during the budget session that the Honorable Minister of Health made a statement on health care financial reform, and we were going there. It's been not half a year since then, but it will be half a year in August, and it will be in perfect time for that announcement, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Second supplementary?
Second supplementary, and I just wondered if the Premier can confirm that the report will be on the web page, which was what was indicated, so that not just people in the House will get to know about this, but anybody could go and find it.
Premier?
Mr. Speaker, I've heard from the Honorable Minister of Health that the announcement will be a public announcement. It won't necessarily be an announcement here, as I can assure the Honorable Opposition Leader, who's worried how frequent we sit, we will not be sitting here in August. But we will have the announcement that will be done in August, Mr. Speaker. And the Minister of Health will not only make that announcement publicly, but she'll be doing the full media rounds, complete with education campaigns, so people can understand precisely what it is that the government is proposing.
Thank you. That now brings us on to the next member who has questions for you, Premier, and that's from the member from constituency 22. Honourable member, would you like to put your question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honourable Premier, my question relates to the allegations of abuse and neglect of Bermudian children at the Department of Child and Family Services and the report produced by the Department of Internal Affairs, which report, per previous discussions, has not been made public. Will the Premier, internal audit, thank you, will the Premier please tell the House who took the decision to use the Department of Internal Audit to investigate the allegations?
Mr. Speaker, I would only assume that it will be either the Secretary to the Cabinet or the head of the Public Service. That would be my assumption. It's not something that is an operational decision, or sorry, it's not something that is a political decision that comes to ministers. That's my assumption, but I can clarify for the honourable member if he wishes.
Thank you. Supplementary?
Yes, supplementary. Given the answer just given by the Honourable Premier, is the House to conclude that you had no involvement in the decision that the Department of Internal Audit would carry out the investigation?
Premier?
Given that it falls under your remit.
Not to my recollection, and the Department of Internal Audit does not fall under the remit of the Premier. It is the reporting line. We are the minister that is administratively responsible, but I think the Department of Internal Audit has clear reporting lines to the Cabinet Secretary underneath the Act, if I'm aware, with my recollection. That's my best recollection at this time, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Second supplementary?
So, sorry, was that a no? You had no involvement in the decision?
Are you going to do a second supplementary?
Mr. Speaker, I don't believe the Premier answered my question whether he had any involvement. I didn't hear him say no.
Premier?
Mr. Speaker, I refer the honourable member to the answer I gave moments ago.
Thank you. And the last member who has an indication from the opposition is the member from constituency number 8. Honourable member?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I understand that the FinTech Fund may have raised some community capital. And so my question is this: how much has the FinTech industry made and contributed to the community fund that the Premier once said would be in place?
Premier?
Mr. Speaker, I do believe that the honourable member is referring to the FinTech Development Fund. Of course, I smile because this is the favorite staple question for the members of the opposition, and it is okay. I will give the answer exactly as I gave it in May and exactly as I gave it in March, that to date there have been no donations to the FinTech Development Fund, and the minute that there is a donation, members of this House will be the first to know.
Thank you. Supplementary? Okay. The next member who has a question for you is a member from constituency 26. Honourable member, would you like to put your question now?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, colleagues. Mr. Speaker, whilst on the doorsteps, a number of my constituents have complained about the Department of Planning and the time that it takes to get work approved. As I know the Premier has committed to making the government more efficient, can you share what is being done to improve the situation?
Premier?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, planning is something that is certainly a challenge. And I say it's a challenge, but I know that we are certainly making progress in this manner. I think the Minister of Home Affairs made a statement to the House in March, speaking about the items that are going to streamline the planning process, such as things which are going to be able to go to the director directly and not the board, new streamlined procedures for emergency application. The Department of Planning will be holding planning clinics throughout the island to provide guidance to the general public, and there's going to be new measures to streamline the revisions process to allow certain minor changes to be implemented in the field.
Thank you. Supplementary?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Premier for that information. However, can I ask, can you tell my constituents, when can I tell my constituents to look forward to the implementation of these changes?
Premier?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I can tell the honorable member that if he's going to be canvassing in August, he'll be able to tell his people that in August those changes will be implemented.
Thank you. The second member has a question for you. I don't see in their seat. The next member on the list is a member from constituency 11. I see you already standing. Would you like to put your question?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
You don't have much time left. You need to put your question.
Mr. Speaker, the government should be commended for putting Wi-Fi in schools because certain other people didn't. But, Mr. Speaker,
Yes?
the teachers in my constituency, because Cousin Evan and I, we canvass, Elliott, Whitney, and another school, have complained about the internet speeds. My question to the Premier is,
I think you're
What
going to lose
can-
out.
what can be done to improve these
Thank you
internet
for your
speeds?
question, Barry. Thank you for your question.